And we are live. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. We've got our live virtual studio audience joining us on Zoom, and to all of you watching on Facebook and on YouTube, it's wonderful to have you here as well. All maybe one of you. So, we're going to talk very briefly about Parshat Vayechi, because I do want us to get into the Mishnah, because we might be able to complete chapter 5 today, and that will be exciting. So here we go with Parshat Vayechi, the last parasha in the book of Bereshit. Ooh, chazak v'nit chazek. So we're at the end of the story of Jacob and his sons, and Jacob has reached the end of his lifetime, and he spent 17 years living in Egypt, reunited with his precious son Joseph, and he's reached the age of 147, and it is time to draw his lifetime to a close. He calls his family to come to be by his bedside so he can bless them all. We start with a bracha for Joseph and his sons, and there's an amazing thing that I'm going to point out over here, because when he's talking to Joseph and he's talking about how he can't believe that he would ever see his face again. So there's a word that he says. He says, the Torah tells us that his eyes were heavy with age. He could not see. So he brings the boys near so he could kiss them and hug him. And then he says to Joseph, in English, he didn't say it in English, but in English, I shall tell you what he said. I dared not accept the thought that I would see your face. And here God has shown me even your offspring. Meaning, like, it never even, I didn't even dream that I would get to see you again, let alone be able to see that you've had a successful life, that you've been able to build a successful family. God has really overdone it on the blessings in that way. But the reason why it's important to point it out is because he says in Hebrew, Ra'o fanecha lo filalti. To see your face, lo filalti. And filalti is an important verb, because there is another verb that we use very, very often when we talk in Hebrew, that is rooted in the same letters. And that word is lehit palel. Lehit palel. So he said, very good, to pray. So he says, Pilalti, in reference to the astonishment that something that he could never have dreamed of happening was going to happen. And it's important for us to realize that when we talk about prayer, and especially the fact that lehit palel is a reflexive verb, meaning that we kind of bring it on ourselves, we do it to ourselves. So the essence of this point is that actually when we pray, we are bringing about the ability for God to fill our lives with something that we would never have been able to dream of on our own. You see, prayer has this dual facet. On the one hand, he knows what's right for us and what's best for us, and on the other hand, we have this paradox where if he wasn't going to give me something and now I've prayed for it and now he gives it to me, so how do I change God's mind? It's something that we've talked about in Cafe Tefillah, he says. Cafe Tefillah is back on Shabbos. So it's this paradox. How can I on the one hand be changing God's mind, and on the other hand he knows what's best for me? And the kind of starting point to understand this is to realize that, yes, he knows what's best for us. Yes, it is coming our way, but we have to kind of unlock the door so that that blessing can enter in and can come through. And it's that is done through tefillah, through being mitpalel, through causing these wondrous things, these wonderful things to occur through our introspection, through our meditation, through our words, through our prayers, through our connection, through our kavanah. Good afternoon, Richard. Welcome to the show. right? So that's the pilalti. That's the wonder and amazement. Like I never thought that this would happen. So it's rooted in this. It's rooted in the same idea. When we pray, we are we are we are positioning ourselves to be appropriate recipients for that which we are asking for. So an interesting subsidiary point. I don't know if that's the right word. Anyway, continuing. So he's giving a bracha to Ephraim and Menashe. And by the way, Yisimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'chi Menashe, we say every Shabbat when we bless our boys. When we bless our girls, we say Yisimech Elohim ke Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah. We bless them that they should be like our matriarchs. So why don't we say that we should bless our boys to be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Well, first of all, I guess it would be a bit egotistical for Jacob to say, may your boys be like me. But anyway, that being said, Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'chi Menashe, they were the first siblings to ever grow up outside the sanctity of a forefather's home. They grew up in Egypt, in a very morally depraved society, raised by Joseph, and they were the first siblings that never fought in all of biblical history. They got along just fine, and they were raised in a horrendous culture, and so one of the reasons, or maybe two of the reasons, why we pray for our sons to grow up and be like Ephraim and Menashe is because who doesn't want that for their own kids? A life where there's no sibling rivalry, a life where there's no domestic battles to be fought, and because most of us, / basically all of us, are growing up with the struggles of society and the struggles of temptation around us. And so we want our children to be able to rise above those challenges and to be successful and connected and healthy and moral and ethical human beings. So I think that's quite nice. So then the parasha continues, and he blesses his 12 sons, and each of his sons get a different blessing. It's not just a one size fits all. He understands that all of his children are different. They all have different makeups. They all have different personalities, and therefore they all need to be treated and directed differently. And then it tells us that he expires, and according to some sources, he never actually died per se. He was divested of his physical connection to this world, and he expires. He receives the kiss of death, so to speak, from Hashem, which is literally the lightest way that a person could go. And then he needs to be buried. So he gets buried, but of course that's a process. Yosef can't just walk out of Egypt and bury his father. Yaakov has asked him to promise that he will be buried in Israel, in the land of Canaan. So they go off and do that. And then it's interesting because after he has died, there's this little flare-up with the brothers where they suddenly panic and they think, oh gosh, maybe Yosef was just pretending all this time. And as soon as his father was out the picture, then he's going to take his revenge. So he has to reassure them. By the way, very interestingly, I don't know if this is written I don't think it's written explicitly in the Torah, or whether it's just implied or inferred, or where we get this from, but he never actually told his father what happened. He never dobbed his brothers in, which is an amazing thing. So that's important to realize, that he never actually puts his brothers in the firing line of his father. So he reassures his brothers that he is not planning to do anything to harm them. And then the end of the book of Bereshit finishes with the death of Joseph as well. And the reason why Joseph has to die at the end of this week's parsha, rather than as we enter into the book of Shemot, is because structurally, as we will see in the coming weeks, months, and years of the bigger picture, the book of Bereshit is very much about the Avot, the forefathers, the building blocks of the nation, and then the Shemot and onwards is very much about the actual nation itself. So we have to complete the story, as it were, of the Avot, and then we can move on to the nation, to the So yeah, chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Mazel tov, everybody, on completing the book of Bereshit. Let's go on with Pirkei Avot.
On Bereshit. Are we still at the end of Bereshit? Are we still in Egypt?
Absolutely, we don't come out. We don't come out of slavery for another 3 weeks.
Right.
Which is a couple of hundred years in in Torah talk. So yes, we're still in it. We finished the book of Bereshit in Egypt, which again structurally is very important and very purposeful. We're just not there yet in the bigger picture, and I don't even know when we will get there. But yes, it has to be that way, very much so. So, a lovely question, Rita. Thank you. You're always the one to concretize and solidify who everything is, what everything is, where everything is, and I love it. I absolutely love it because keeps me on my toes, and it's often more important than the waffle that I give you. So it's great. Pardon me?
I get the same thing.
You get the same thing. It's good. It's a logical mind. So it's very good. All right, here we go. Chapter 5, and we are still in Mishnah 25, or it says there 21 on the screen. And we were going to just go through some of these ages and stages, if you recall. We had said that there are different milestones, different targets to be reached at different stages of life. All right, is this ringing bells? I know that some of you weren't here last week, so let's just take a little look at the words of the Mishnah again. Okay, we were talking about Yehuda ben Tema, and he used to say that there are different points at which we should try and hit different targets, certainly in our younger years when it comes to education. And on top of that, there are different milestones or different what word can I use to describe this? But different achievements, different traits, different things that happen to us as we get older and older and older. So he used to say, at 5 years old, we should start teaching children the verses of the Torah, of the Chumash, of the prophets, of the writings. They should start to learn these verses, and you have to appreciate as well, being that this text is from thousands of years ago, we're talking about getting children to a point where they're memorizing all of Torah. And then it says that at the age of 10, they should start memorizing all of Mishnah. And at the age of 15, they should be memorizing all of Talmud, all of the rulings and the laws and the logic and the opinions and the reasons for all of the different laws, so that by the time they are 18, 20 years old, they are well equipped with a robust Jewish education to see them through. And this was something that I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on, because it's interesting to point out. You know, we live in a world now with national curriculums and with different yardsticks of success that we have to have children reaching. And it's very easy to read this and think how obsolete it is, and to think how outdated it is, because they need to learn all kinds of very important things like geometry and algebra and trigonometry and science and physics and biology, and how are they going to get that just by reading, by learning these things? So there's a very famous Gemara that talks about some of our greatest sages and the areas of wisdom that they had and the areas of knowledge that they had. And I think it's worth pointing out that, these encyclopedic levels of knowledge that our rabbis historically would have reached would have been through a curriculum like this. And that there is enough wisdom in the Torah to be able to be phenomenally well versed in secular disciplines of knowledge, or what we would now call secular disciplines of knowledge. There are famous examples of this, by the way. There are famous examples of pieces of Gemara that you can only understand if you can calculate the value of pi. Right, so it talks about calculating the what does pi r squared give us? It gives us what does pi r squared give us?
The area
of a circle. Thank you. So it calculates the area of a circle in the Gemara in reference to how to build a sukkah, and it does this through mathematical calculations. So they knew this stuff, and you can learn this stuff just from verses and Mishnah and Gemara, and you've got rabbis who are experts in the way in which you needed to mathematically calculate the length of a month so that you could know when Rosh Chodesh was going to be and know when Rosh Hashanah was going to be. You know, there were experts on astronomy, there were experts on geometry, on all of these very difficult mathematical and scientific disciplines. They knew it. They just knew it and were taught it differently. And so I feel like that's an important point to mention. If you go through some of these pieces of Gemara, I certainly don't understand them, but the only way that you can understand them is with advanced understanding of mathematical, algebraic principles, and that's important. One of the things that I never even noticed, I completely missed this, but we know that modern words, Latin words, English words, we find that they are rooted in Semitic languages such as Hebrew, such as Aramaic. Now there is a word called gematria, which talks about the numerical values of different letters and how it all adds up and how it all calculates. And it's interesting because somebody pointed out that the word geometry is rooted in the word gematria. I'd never picked up on that. I'd never noticed that, but it's just so obvious that there is a connection there, because a gimel can also be a j as the flow of history developed. So gematria, geometry, they are rooted. So we shouldn't read this Mishnah and think it's obsolete and think that if people had this kind of education, then they won't be well versed in secular disciplines. It's inaccurate. I'm not saying that nowadays we are very successful in bridging these two worlds, and that with an exclusively Torah education that we could guarantee a high level of academic success in these secular disciplines, but the information and the wisdom is all there if one knows how to access it and one knows how to teach it. And there are books written on the subject of how technical and complex some of our different sources are, and how we learn different things. You know, it took NASA until the 20th century to figure out how long a year is, with all kinds of computers and all kinds of calculations. But our rabbis calculated it thousands of years ago. So the information, the wisdom is there. One just needs to have it applied and taught correctly. Anyway, we continue. So let's have a look. Bit young, isn't it? Ben Shmona Esrei lechuppah, at 18 years old to the chuppah. It hasn't happened for many people in this day and age. It did happen with perhaps in grandparents' generations and people coming out of the Holocaust. People may have been getting very young, and stories of perhaps your own parents or your friends' parents meeting their loved ones at 17, 18 and getting engaged and married shortly thereafter. But nowadays we wouldn't necessarily encourage our...
We think you're
Go on, Rita.
In the Haredi communities this time.
They still do.
That's right. That's right. So that's because of things like this Mishnah, because we're being taught that this is a good piece of advice. It might not necessarily be the best financial advice, but there's clearly more going on than meets the eye as to why Yehuda ben Tamer would be so insistent to even put a number on it, because people don't like to be told when they should get married nowadays. When I'm good and ready, when I've settled down, when I've got my career, when I've got my house, when I've got this and I've got certain things in place, then I'll get married. I don't need a rabbi to tell me when. So I'm not delegitimizing that. I didn't get married at the age of 18. Sure, I wasn't far off, but no, she she was just turning 21. But there's obviously a reason why the Mishnah would encourage early marriage, and there must be a reason why up until the late 19th century it was very much the case that people would get married at very young ages. And fundamentally, I believe the root of the reason is because we are trying to advise younger people to channel and conquer their physical desires. We can't escape the fact that people have urges and people have lusts and people have needs. And oh yes, that's right, guys. It is my anniversary today. He's just private messaged me to say, "Oh, it's your wedding anniversary today." That's true. It is. Happy anniversary to me. Pardon me. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, good point. Happy anniversary, Dolly. Complete. No, I'm joking. Didn't forget. So, so it's good advice to recognize that young people have urges and desires that need to be channeled into healthy relationships. As Jews, we are taught that sex before marriage is a big no-no. As you'll know from very orthodox circles, touching before marriage is a big no-no as well. And these are all safeguards in order to protect the sanctity of relationships. Sex is not a dirty word in Judaism. It's just supposed to be private, and it's supposed to be discreet, and it's supposed to be not something that is widely shared with those around you. There's supposed to be modesty, and there's supposed to be delicacy. Delicacy? No, I don't know if that's a good word to use in the context, but it's supposed to be a lofty and holy thing, and not a crude, sensualized, self-gratifying experience, which is very much, I think, you can agree with me or disagree with me and shout vociferously if you like, but that's very much how society seems to have steered this topic and this conversation. And the kinds of things that people get up to in their younger years and their years of experimentation are very much not encouraged in Jewish law. And so an early marriage is one good step to preserving all of those things. It's also can't be overlooked that younger people are more flexible and can adjust more easily. So it can become a challenge for people who make decisions when they're late, when they are later in life, that they're going to start to settle down. It can be a challenge for people to make the space needed for another person, and to be able to make a relationship blossom and grow and strengthen. These things are more easily can be more easy to deal with when a person is younger and not so developed and not so advanced with their career and their expectations and their social circles and all of these other things. And it was once remarked to me by a dear friend of mine who said, there are two ways that you can get married. There's the way of, I've got my house, I've got my car, I've got my kitchen, I've got my oven and my cooker and my washing machine, and my partner will kind of slot in nicely amongst all of the other furnishings in my house, But there's the other way, which is we're going to build all of these things together, and we're going to build our home together, and we're going to make decisions together, and that is an approach that is encouraged, because that way you're building. Now, society is a very different world than it ever has been, and you may even have people who try for many years to settle down and find that happiness, and it just doesn't happen for them. And so this Mishnah shouldn't be taken as a criticism for people, but the sentiments are there. The advantages to building a life together from an early age are significant. You can't. There are people who manage to get to their 60th and 65th wedding anniversaries by the time they hit their 90s, and you think like, wow, what a phenomenally long time. You're building an entire life with your soulmate, with the one who is nearest and dearest to you, and it's an amazing thing, and there's a beauty to it. So yeah, I think go on.
That couple sees each other 7 days before the wedding. And I think wonderful, because the less is
Try again, Rita.
I said it's a wonderful thing.
No, can't hear.
No.
It's very muffled.
I can't hear you. You might just need to twist something a bit nearer to you so the microphone
It's like echoing.
Is this better?
For me, it is.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that in Jewish wedding ceremony, you're not supposed to see your bride, not supposed to see the bride, and vice versa. And the reason being the less of everything is stronger.
Yeah, so if you didn't hear what Rita was saying, she was saying that in a Jewish wedding, the bride and groom usually won't see each other for the week leading up to the wedding. And that's so that when they do eventually see each other on the day, they are more excited. They've been missing each other, and the connection will be that much more intense, because the more that you expose yourself to something, the more desensitized you become. I'm just trying to remember what I was talking to Shira about yesterday, and whether the conversation is actually something that I can share. No, it's not. But we were having a conversation about how desensitized people get from the types of media that they are exposed to, and the type of expectations that films and advertisements and all of these things, and that's if you're one of the lucky ones who get exposed to that kind of thing. But the more extreme adult variety of entertainment that people seem to get preoccupied with very much desensitize people to healthy relationships and to healthy intimacy. And that's all of that is discouraged in Judaism for a very good reason. So yeah, and the monthly menstrual cycle, and the way in which husbands and wives are encouraged to separate when a wife is going through her menstrual cycle, that's all part of creating a degree of separation that allows couples to find ways of making their relationship work without exclusively using physical contact. You build a deeper, more robust relationship, and it enhances and intensifies the occasions when physically couples are allowed to be together. So these are all systems that we have in place to create healthy and successful marriages and relationships. There's all kinds of things that we could say on it, but yeah, I'm not going to. Peter.
I suppose one of the advantages in those days is if you had got married at the age of 18, you could have children in your life.
Right.
And I think two generations ago.
Yeah.
I'll tell you in a second. I'll tell you in a second. Go on.
That my grandmother was one of 10 children. So, get married at 18, you have more children.
Yeah, so Peter was saying that it would be that you start earlier so that you can have more children, and how people in our parents / grandparents / great grandparents generations would have been one of 9, 10 or more children, and nowadays people are having fewer children. So yes, that is a fair point as well. It is very rare. So
everything has changed. Society has changed.
yeah.
In those days, girls didn't work. So everything changed as well. You know? But I mean, I understand what you're saying, obviously, and I can understand it. But the whole society changed so much.
Yeah, if you didn't hear what Howard was saying, society had also changed as women started to work as well. So, not all of the societal factors are negative, but society has certainly developed and has certainly changed 100%. Now, let me just try one thing. 1 second.
Can you see me?
Okay, people, just a couple of you just say some things and see if you're echoed. Go on, Joe.
Well, I was going to say I was married at 18. I went to Oxford and St George's Jewish Club, and we all paired off quite young. And it was quite common in the 60s to go steady with someone. You went with one boyfriend. You were expected then to get engaged and married. I was married at 18, and nearly all my friends were very young. And in my case, it was a mistake. I was too young. But, that's what happened then. It was common in the community to marry young.
Yeah, and
someone, then you expected to marry them.
And people did grow up. Sorry, Rita.
No, I'm saying when we met, Peter and I, we were married 7 months later. So
sweet.
Yeah, once you're engaged, you think I'm sorry about this. Sorry.
You're okay.
So it was very common then.
Yeah, but people also had to grow up a lot quicker back in the day.
Yes.
And now, people are more different words could be used for different people, but be it immature, be it self-absorbed, be it mollycoddled, people are reaching that point later in life now where they are perhaps better equipped to handle the
one you left out, Rabbi Nick.
Yeah.
Career-minded
as well. It can hold people up, and the sad thing is that there are people who report. You see both ways. You see people who say, "I never regret for a moment focusing on my career, even though it meant that I only met my whatever much later in life, or it only meant that I could build my family later in life, or maybe some people never get to build." There are people who feel very satisfied from not having those opportunities earlier in life, and then there are some who say, "I wish I hadn't been so career-minded. It wasn't worth it." So, I think the important thing really is that one has to at least be wary of this situation. I think personally that society now would almost encourage people to start later, and to think about things later, and to wait for certain things to be in place before they take steps such as getting married, or finding that person to settle down with. And there's probably not enough airtime or not enough conversations happening for people to consider anything else, because now it's almost socially inappropriate to do these things earlier. And that's compound that struggle is compounded by the fact that it's socially inappropriate to only have one partner, and to only do things when you are married. And it's hugely common now, even in the Jewish circles, for couples to basically be living as husband and wife before they actually tie the knot and before they actually get to the chuppah. To the point that some people feel that it's strange that they've been more conservative in their approach. So I think there's just an importance there of a balance of conversation, because I think society is heading in a direction where it becomes almost unacceptable, or the exception to the rule, or that you are prude, or that you are goody two shoes if you want to take things in a different way in terms of building your relationships. So I think that's also important to bear in mind. We're very quick as a modern or postmodern society to say, the old way is wrong. People should be able to do whatever they want. They should be able to explore. They should be able to move in together. They should be able to, take each other for a test drive before making the commitment. It's a very prevalent approach in society, but not one that's necessarily, the counter to that is not necessarily given as much airtime or consideration. Anyway, that's only marriage. Well, we're not going to get onto the onto the last Mishnah today, are we? So let's move on. Ben Esrim Lirdof, the age of 20, where we start to get into some physical and psychological stages of life. And I think before we go through these different milestones, I think it's important to notice that the older that you're getting in this Mishnah, the more refined you are becoming. There's a certain level of respect and grace to how we view people who get older, which is, again, society nowadays, the older you are, the less we want to take notice of your opinion. And, the more antiquated and outdated you are. So we have people now in their 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s who have very conservative, old school opinions, and your average Hanukkah dinner or your average Shabbat table, you've got kids who are far more enlightened and far more cultured than you are, and so we very much dismiss people as they get older in this day and age. And if you remember that other source that I showed you last week about how chutzpah increases and we have more disrespect for our elders in this day and age, I think if we think about that and reflect on that, I think it's definitely a truism, and it's definitely the truth. But here we're seeing that you get wiser, you get stronger, you get more accomplished, you are more reliable as you get older. We treat age like we do fine wine. The older you are, the better you are. That's not necessarily a particularly modern or secular way of looking at these issues. There's a famous story about a rabbi and a scientist sitting next to each other on a plane. Don't know if you've heard this story before. It's one of those ones where not every story is true, but there's truth to every story. So a rabbi and a scientist are sitting next to each other on a plane, and the scientist observes how the rabbi's grandchildren are coming over to him during the flight to see how he is, to see if there's anything they can get, to see if they can study with him and ask him a question or whatever it is. And the scientist says, that's just, it's unbelievable. I don't understand. My grandchildren would barely even come near me. They barely want anything to do with me. And your grandchildren are waiting on you like you are some, important member of the royal family. So this elder rabbi turns to him and he says, well, I've always educated my children that we were created. We are born of a creator. And therefore, when they look at me, they see me as one step closer in that chain of people taking us all the way back to Moses and Mount Sinai. But you teach your children that you are descended from monkeys. So every time your grandchildren look at you, they see you as one step closer to a chimpanzee. So, as I said, not every story is true, but there's truth to every story. We have respect for our elders. We're supposed to stand up when an elder comes into the room. Because, as we will see from this Mishnah, you only get better and better. We get more mature in terms of our action, in terms of our outlook, in terms of our goals, and we get more perspective, and we get more wise, and we get more experience. There's another famous joke, good joke, I don't know, famous or good, you can judge it. But it's these two old men sitting on the porch of one of these, like American country houses, overlooking the country lane, and they're sitting there arguing. They're saying, I'm telling you it's 21. And the other fella says to him, no, you're wrong. It was 22. And he says, no, you're an idiot. If you think it was 22, it was 21. So someone comes over and sees the passion and the vigor in these old people fighting. And he says, what are you fighting about? It must be really important. And he goes, he says that only 21 cars have driven down this road today, whereas I think it's 22. So it's this attitude of, as you get older, if you have had the right focuses in life, if you have followed your dreams and built a robust life around you, then those older years will be far more enlightened and far more still cultured and still active and still vibrant, rather than just kind of like wanting to get to the end already and everything being meaningless. So we build through age rather than decline, as it were. So age 20. Yeah.
Rabbi, can I just say I've got to go?
No, you can't.
Thank you. I've got to go, but thank you very much indeed.
A pleasure.
And stay safe, everyone.
We'll finish the chapter next week, Howard.
Okay, thanks. Bye. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
So Ben Esrim Lirdof. Lirdof means to pursue. So what's the pursuit that we're talking about? So in the main, the commentary is talking about pursuing a livelihood. So you've gone through your robust education and you've found your life partner, and now it's time to actually get on, and everything that you've got, all that wisdom, all that knowledge, now it's time to pursue a livelihood. And that comes around the age of 20. Other interpretations say that the age of 20 is actually the age at which the heavenly court will now pursue us for our actions and hold us liable, truly liable. See, when we're at the age of 13, we become obligated, or the age of 12 for girls, we become obligated in mitzvot, but we're given a kind of buffer, a kind of grace period to figure out how to actually live that life of Torah and mitzvot. And so the age of 20, that's really now when we're really held accountable. And that's why in the desert, the people who wept because of the spies and the people who were sentenced to die in the desert, they were over the age of 20, because that's the age of spiritual accountability. There's another opinion that says that if you didn't get married at 18 and you didn't get married at 19, then by 20, that's when you really need to start pursuing this now and really start thinking seriously about settling down. So that's Ben Esrim Lirdof. It's some kind of pursuing, be it pursuing of livelihood, the fact that you now are spiritually accountable and the heavenly court pursues you. So whatever way round it is, that's the age of 20. The age of 30, we say, is lakoach. It is the age of your peak and the height of your physical strength. Where do they get this number from? So the Levites had to be 30 years old before they started loading and unloading the wagons to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle, and that's because that is the height of your strength. Another interpretation, interestingly, is that koach means the power to influence others. So you spend kind of 30 years acquiring your knowledge and acquiring your wisdom, and from the age of 30, you are now a bit more of an accomplished thinker to be able to share and influence others. So that's Ben Shloshim Lakoach. Ben Arba'im Labina. The age of 40 is the age at which you attain understanding. So the commentaries talk about how, by the age of 40, your intellectual abilities have matured. You are more perceptive, you are able to really understand ideas, and you're able to extrapolate from one thing to another. And your neural network by the age of 40 is really holding in a very good and informed place. Rashi, interestingly, says that a person shouldn't take on the role of ruling on people's halachic questions until they're at the age of 40. And more famously, people will know that this idea that you shouldn't start learning Kabbalah, shouldn't start learning the mystical sources until the age of 40. Is that something that people have heard before?
Yes.
So everyone knows that one, and it's not a magic number. It's just the fact that by the age of 40, with a good block of experience under your belt and good training of the mind, we should now be more. I'm not 40 yet, but we should be. We should have strong intellectual capabilities by then. And interestingly, Abraham found Hashem at the age of 40, according to some people. It took 40 years of being in the desert before Moses felt like he could turn around and tell the Jewish people that they can now appreciate the awesome miracles and the miraculous survival of the Jewish people in the desert. That takes 40 years to instill in a person, to really appreciate the degree of gratitude and allegiance that we owe Hashem. Rita, were you going to ask something?
I said wisdom, wiser.
Why is that? Why is 40 associated with wisdom?
Well, no, you said wisdom, so I said at 40 you're wiser.
You are? Yes. As a composite of your life experience so far, the assumption is that by 40 you are mentally strong and have capabilities that you wouldn't have in earlier life. Ben Chamishim La'etza. 50 is the age when you can offer counsel. And where do we get this from? We get it from the Levites again, because they would stop being the schleppers at the age of 50, and they instead would act as guides and as counselors for the rest of the Levium, and they've now got a wealth of life experience to draw on. And this is what I'm saying: as people get more experienced and as people are getting older, they're getting wiser as well, and we should treat them as such. Ben Shishim Lezikna. 60 is the age of seniority. Interestingly, it translates it on the screen. Translates it in my book as attains seniority. What does it say there? At 60 old age, yeah. Okay, so it's just interesting how my book translates it as it's an attainment to reach the age of seniority. You're starting to appear senior, but you are most certainly also again more mentally robust, for want of a better word, by the age of 60. this is also, interestingly, halfway through a person's lifetime. So 60 is very much seen as a turning point. Again, society has kind of shifted its expectations, but historically, a person who lived past the age of 60 would not be considered to have passed away at a young age, because the age of 60 historically was an amazing accomplishment. That has very much changed now as life expectancy has risen. But there is a story about Rav Yosef, who made a party when he turned 60, because he saw this as like, I've made it halfway through. I've had a pretty good innings already. I'm not saying that that's how we should view life. I'm just saying how historically these things would have been seen. Ben Shivim L'Seva, 70 attains a ripe old age. What does it say on the screen? It says fullness of years. Thank you. Fullness of years. So there's a certain degree of respect and of appreciation that for someone who reaches this age, that it's a pretty amazing thing. And there's a famous story that we read every year on Pesach about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. When we read that bit in the Haggadah where he says, "I am like a man of 70 years," and we always ask, what's that whole thing about? I am like a man of 70 years. So the point at which he said that, he was only 18 years old. So why is he saying, I am like a man of 70 years? And the story goes that, I've forgotten who, I think it was Rabbi Gamliel got ousted as the Nasi, as the head of the Jewish community, and they needed a replacement. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was the best candidate. He was a childhood prodigy. He was an absolute genius. But there was just one problem. He looked like an 18-year-old. And he was concerned that nobody would give him any respect. So the story goes that he went to sleep one night, and when he woke up the next morning, his hair had turned white overnight, and his beard had turned white overnight. And that is why he says, I appear like a man of 70 years old, because his physical appearance changed miraculously so that he would accept the position as Nasi, because, again, you have to give respect to your elders. So one of the reasons why 70 is considered fullness of age is because King David was 70 when he died. And there's a famous story that we talked about in the bigger picture, that Adam was destined to live for 1,000 years, and he saw that the Mashiach, or the lineage of Mashiach, was supposed to be born and die on the same day. King David was destined to die in childbirth, so he donates 70 years to King David, and that's why Adam dies at the age of 930. King David lives till the age of 70, dies bang on his birthday at the age of 70, and that's why King David says, I have had fullness of years. So fullness of years is associated with the number 70. Ben Shmonim Ligvura. This is an interesting one, isn't it? An 80-year-old shows strength. Now this is completely counter to how we would think, because we would think 80-year-olds are already starting to get weaker, and yet in Judaism 80-year-olds are strong. They're giborim. So one of the ways of understanding this is that their physical powers are starting to wane, but that means that their soul becomes more dominant, which is an amazing thing as well. You reach the age of 80, and you are now able to spiritually become very, very strong. You're not going to necessarily have the same physical urges or the same need for physical pleasures and satisfaction, and so that should allow us at the age of 80 to enjoy spiritual pursuits. So we are becoming stronger in our spiritual pursuits because we're not so busy chasing the fancy cars and the fancy holidays and the big mansions. People are already downsizing by the time they're 80, not looking for the bigger mansion. But it's also to do with the strength of overcoming the Yetzer Hara, because as we've read previously, don't believe in yourself until the day you die, if you remember that one. And we talked about one of the high priests called Yochanan Kohen Gadol, who at the age of 80 became a heretic. Even though he held one of the highest positions as the high priest, he became a heretic at the age of 80. So you need gevurah. You need the ability to overcome your Yetzer Hara, your inclination, even at the age of 80, because you can never be certain that it won't become a problem for you. Ben Tishim, at the age of 90, it says lashuach. You are stooped over. There weren't too many commentaries on this, but I kind of think it is as it is a little bit. You're a person at the age of 90 is that much closer to the end than they would have been at any other earlier point. And Ben Meah Ke'ilu Meit Va'avaru Vatel Min Ha'olam, at the age of 100, says the Mishnah, it is as if you are dead and have passed away and ceased from this world. Now, seems harsh, sounds harsh. Simple explanation is pretty harsh, but there are some very nice things. There's a commentary called the Tiferes Yisrael, who says that because you are, no longer enjoying physical strength as you may have done in your younger years, you are that much more connected to spirituality and to emotions, and so you are disengaged from the false allure of the world. And so when we say that it's as if you are already passed from this world, it's saying that you've already disconnected with the physical limitations and with the physical pursuits, and so it doesn't have to be read exclusively as a bad thing, because in a spiritual sense you are now very much detached from all of the negativity and all of the potential for evil of the physical world. So there we go. That takes us through that Mishnah. We can take comments and questions, but let's end the recording for now on YouTube and on Zoom. So to all those not on Zoom, that's all we got time for. And we'll see you next week when, please God, we will actually finish chapter 5. We won't see you next week. Oh man, we're going to be in the new year before we actually finish. Oh God, I really wanted to. Oh man. But that's okay. So we will finish this next time, and we'll see everybody very, very soon. So wishing everybody well and a wonderful, meaningful day. Lots of love, and take care.